Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv Wolok. I am alone today. Vasili Gianarakos is on vacation. I was on vacation right before that. He left on vacation when I got back. So we find ourselves just me recording. He's off having a great time with his fiance, so I am very happy for him. Yeah, we still have hockey to talk about. There's definitely still news. Things are still happening. So I wanted to make sure we still got an episode out this week. So decided to go at it alone. I haven't done one of these in a while, and it sounded fun. I was thinking about inviting somebody, but I was like, you know what? I haven't ranted by myself in front of the camera for a little bit, so figured I would take the opportunity to do so. I do have topics, so it's not going to be that different from usual. It's just going to be me talking to myself primarily. But I am well prepared to talk to myself. I enjoy it and do it often. All right. Before we get started, just want to remind everybody to please like, subscribe, share, follow us on Spotify, follow us on iTunes, give us a rating on both if you can. All that stuff is incredibly helpful. Again, you can hit the notification bell on YouTube to get notified when these episodes come out. They're typically out either on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, depending on when Flyers games are or our schedules align. So that's primarily why we're so inconsistent as to what day and why we don't do the same day every week. But we want to make sure that if there's a Flyers game coming up, that we talk about it pretty much immediately, and we kind of do a wrap up of everything that happened. So we don't focus too much on being on the exact same day, just kind of in that same window. In the off season, it's more consistent because there's no hockey games, right? So we can do like every Tuesday, every Wednesday, or whatever. But in this case, that's why we kind of shift things around. As you see, Vasili and I both have full-time jobs on top of this. So, and I'm actually starting a company on the side. Hopefully that will be announced sometime in the near future. But I have to hit some success there before I announce anything. All right. Let's get into it. We have our two sponsors. Actually, before I get started, Jim Steaks on 4th and South and Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Make sure to check both of them out. Make sure to get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim Steaks, and make sure to reach out to Public Summit Adjusters for all of your adjuster needs. Okay. There's been some things happening, not just in the NHL. Obviously, the trade deadline is coming on, but the Flyers are continuing. There was obviously a big game, the one that was, somewhat disappointing. I'll get into that a little bit. There was kind of a wild game right before that, and then kind of one to top it off and bring it all home with the recent win over the Chicago Blackhawks. So I'll get into all three of those, and then we'll get into specific players. I'm kind of just shoot off the hip, though I do have some topics to get through. So first game I want to talk about is the Flyers losing in overtime to Austin Matthews. And I'm kind of joking, but not that joking, because if you really watch that game, not that the Leafs played like horribly. Again, they were up 3-1 in that game, but they weren't the better team. This is why everybody wants a superstar on their team. I mean, he is an X factor. We can talk about it with TK against Chicago. Again, TK is not Austin Matthews. Austin Matthews right now, from what I gather, and my math is, I haven't looked at his scoring pace since the other day where he had 2 hat tricks in a row. He's on a 70-goal pace. That has not been done in a very long time. He is outrageously talented. Okay. I don't know if he's generational. Again, he'd have to do it every year, but so far he's kind of on track for that. Again, even when I say, Michkov is generational, I say he's a generational pace. Matthews is on a generational pace. I mean, let's be honest. He doesn't solidify that, but he's definitely the best American goal scorer in the NHL. Like that, without a doubt. Is he the best goal scorer in the NHL? That argument can definitely be made now, especially as Ovechkin kind of finds his way, towards the end of his career. You have Pasternak out there. There are other great goal scorers. There's Kucherov, right? There are other great players, but Matthews is kind of separating himself from the pack. And it showed in that game, right? The Flyers, in my opinion, were the better team in that game for the larger portion of the game. They didn't dominate Toronto by any stretch, but a full on lineup top to bottom, the Flyers, I would say, had better, they had the better of the play overall. But that didn't seem to really matter in the end, because Toronto won that game. And yes, they won in overtime, but they did take somewhat of a commanding 3-1 lead. Now, the Flyers did go up first, right? Travis Sanheim allowed the Flyers to kind of go up 1-0. But in that second period, it was the Austin Matthews show, and he got his 43rd, 44th, and 45th goals in a row for a natural hat trick. He did it pretty much in a 10-minute window. So he just went off. Again, this is what players like him and Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, right? Kucherov, like eventually Connor Bedard. They're going to be able to do this. They are the best players in the world. They're the 1% of the 1%. It's a level of talent really the Flyers have not had since like arguably Claude Giroux has had this peak, but he really only did it for about like 2 seasons, where these guys kind of do it every year. So I wouldn't put Giroux necessarily in their level, but it's really Eric Lindros level, right? That guy who's just a dominant force and will do it pretty much every night. And if he wants to take over a game, he's absolutely capable of doing it. And that's what Austin Matthews did. Now, the Flyers, to their credit, never gave up in that game. Again, that is a theme that is kind of carried with this team the entire season. They've never really lost that energy, even if they lost it for like a game or two. They never really lost it in general. And they did fight and claw their way back into it again, scoring kind of sequential goals. Again, a big goal by Garrett Hathaway. He has been heating up of late, assisted by Noah Cates, who's also seems to be getting back on his game. I'll talk a little bit about that. And then Travis Konechny obviously scores the power play goal, which a rare power play goal for the Flyers. They tie it. They go into overtime, and then they make one stupid play, and William Nylander buries it. Again, another very talented player. Not a like franchise caliber player, but definitely a damn good player. And this is what I talk about with all-star players, elite players. Like Nylander is elite, right? They can touch that top of the league in points. They can play around in that category. This is where Travis Konechny is, right? This is, I would say Giroux is a little bit above that, right? It's kind of weird to classify players because it's really done retrospectively. But those players who can like kind of touch the top of the league in points, maybe middle around the top 10, maybe even lead the league in points, or Giroux was doing that at one point. Voracek was doing that at one point, right? And they're not doing it every year, but they are elite players. They're beyond just considerable all-star players. I think Konechny is entering that phase of his career. We'll see if he's able to maintain it throughout the longevity of his career, but William Nylander is there right now. They obviously have Mitch Marner, who I would say is pretty much in that category, maybe more in that Giroux territory, just because he's been really good every year. At least to the same level, same pedigree. I believe they're all overpaid, but that's more because of the economy they live in. I believe if they played in a different city, they probably would all make at least $1 million less. Taxes absolutely matter. Cost of living matters. Anybody who tells you that in media that it doesn't matter and can be made up in other ways, bullshit. Everything can be made up in other ways. They want their pay. I mean, if you look at any industry, right? Even with remote working, like for instance, if you get a job for Facebook, right? They pay very well for the average person. They will pay you less depending on where you live. They'll still pay you very well, but you'll get incrementally less salary depending on your cost of living. So it absolutely matters. And if it matters in smaller contracts, which at Facebook you can make anywhere between 150 to director level makes about $1 million a year, plus they can make 20 to 40% bonuses and whatnot. That's kind of the more rare categories, but they make anywhere between 150 to $400,000 a year. If they're doing it on those kind of contracts for these kind of high prestigious jobs at Facebook, they're definitely doing it to professional athletes at $10 million, $11 million. They're thinking about it. Promise you that. So again, the Flyers had a pretty good game there. Again, I like their fight. This is something that's been very consistent. And then we go to the game against New Jersey, a high-profile game in the Stadium Series. This game, man, when the Flyers gave up that goal to start the game, I already had this sinking feeling in my gut where I'm like, they are not going to play their game. I just knew it. I was like, there's two options here, obviously. Either it's just a simple mistake and it happens, or they're going to try this bullshit run and gun game, which they are not good at, and they're going to lose. And I had that feeling in my gut the entire game. And again, that first goal was just a simple mistake. I do not put that on air, son. It's a breakaway. It'd been nice to get a save there, but again, you're kind of leaving them high and dry without taking a single shot in the game. They didn't play horrendously in that game. In fact, at points in that game, they absolutely dominated New Jersey. I do not think New Jersey outplayed them. I'll make that very clear. What the Flyers did wrong is that they did not play their game. They don't win when they play the other team's game. You want to play run and gun with a team with more shooters than you, you're going to lose. The Flyers' benefit, at least they did have two goalies, but has been defense, goaltending, and punishing teams for making mistakes, not being the team that makes mistakes. And we saw that theme in the Chicago game, too. That's why they didn't play that well. They took a bunch of risky opportunities. Just Chicago can't make them pay the way New Jersey can. New Jersey is not a great team, in my opinion. They're a good team. They're a talented team. They're not, I don't think the Flyers are like better than them. I think the Flyers have played better than them this year. I don't think they're really better than the Flyers, though. I'll make that clear, too. I know a lot of people probably disagree with me. I mean, maybe Jack Hughes is kind of that X factor. He's growing into that, potential franchise player. I think he's on his way there. He was kind of getting there until his injury. We'll have to wait and see. I'm a huge Jack Hughes fan. I would love to credit him ahead of time, but he's not quite there yet. Nico Hischier is an all-star level player, right? He's not a superstar. He could end up being. He's still kind of developing. He's still pretty young, but he is definitely a regular all-star caliber player. They have Bratt. They have a bunch of talent, right? It's not that they're not talented. I think people just really underestimate the talent on the Flyers. I still hear it. I hear it on other podcasts. It's like they'll say something positive and they'll throw a caveat. And it's like, look, you can either ignore reality but you cannot ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. You can say all day that the Flyers don't have talent, but when they beat the better teams in the league, what do you think that is? I get that they don't have the elite scorer, right? They don't have a Kucherov, right? They don't have that guy. They pretty much have everything but. And I'm going to talk about that at the end. This team is not really far away. It's just underdeveloped. There's a bunch of young players. I think they were ranked the 9th youngest team in the league. And that's with having Cam Atkinson and Coots and Walker and Sealer. Like some of these guys, I mean, Coots will be here, but some of these guys will not be here. So it's important to realize that the Flyers are a talented team. I don't care what John Tortorella says to me. He says stuff to me, right? To me, and being the audience, like us, that I didn't agree with, and I ended up being right. Why? Because I knew this team. Like I said in the beginning of the season, if you've been listening long enough, I said, Sean Couturier is the captain of this team. The only reason he doesn't have a C is because Tortorella doesn't know him yet. And I go, the captain is not selected by the coach, selected by the team, but the coach is the one who identifies it. That's why he didn't ask anybody. He just observed, saw what we have seen or what I have seen for years, right? I'm pretty sure Vasili would agree with me on this. And he went, yep, that's the guy. And a lot of people have been screaming for TK. I just don't think TK is quite there to be captain level, but he definitely has leadership ability. I mean, he got the A for a reason. He is a motor. He leads in the same way Peter Forsberg led, which Peter Forsberg was not an amazing captain, but he set the tone of the team. Like when he would be on the ice, the team would follow. And that can be captain material. I just personally prefer a guy who doesn't just set the tone, but also knows what to say. And I feel like Couturier has some of that. He's a future head coach in the league, in my opinion. Either coach or GM or whatever. He will absolutely have a career in the NHL after his playing career. I have almost no doubt in that. He just understands the game. Mentally, he is a 1%er in the league. He probably understands the game better than some guys who are more talented than him. That I don't doubt. So Flyers lose a brutal loss to the Blackhawks. It was brutal. It's because it's another outdoor game. The goals that they gave up were based on mistakes. A lot of the opportunities New Jersey gave up, that the Flyers gave up against New Jersey were avoidable, and they just didn't play well. They didn't play their A game. They didn't bring it. It is what it is. New Jersey played better. They deserve the win, and they deserve the divisional win. They wanted it more. And the Flyers, I don't know. This is what Tortorella was talking about. He was just trying to get them to focus on the game and not so much family stuff. I don't really know if that's a problem. I'm not going to assume that. Who really knows? But they didn't bring their A game. We've seen them play their A game. That wasn't it. Their A game has a lot less mistakes in it. Not mistake free. That never really happens, but a lot less. And when I see that many odd man breaks, I'm not happy. That when I watch a Flyers game, if you want to know what pisses me off, not shooting the puck when they don't shoot, when they want a fancier opportunity, especially early in a game. Later in a game doesn't bother me as much, but early in a game drives me nuts. And giving up, being overly aggressive, especially early in the game, which is exactly the stuff they were doing in the beginning of that game against New Jersey. That drove me nuts. I felt it in my gut. I'm like, this is not the way they play when they are successful. This is the way the team that they played when they finished 7th in the league. And that was more based off of a talent issue because of injuries and whatnot. But it was also their process, right? They weren't actually the 7th worst team in the league last year by talent. They would have been, right outside the top 10 probably if they didn't have injuries, which would have been worse. We wouldn't have got Michkov. So let things fall as they may. Don't ever panic. I do want to talk about the captaincy a little bit, but let me get into this New Jersey or this Blackhawks game. So the Flyers do rebound strong against the Chicago Blackhawks. They go in and play Connor Bedard, who has been red hot coming back from injury. Again, he's wearing the full bubble face. So nobody can say that he didn't, it was his first game back or something like that. He definitely had his opportunities. Look, we're watching the infancy stage of what probably will be the best player in the NHL, or at least in the conversation of best player in the NHL for at least a decade, right? He is the upcoming of McDavid and what McDavid was for Crosby. You see that in Bedard. You have to be out of your goddamn mind to not see it. The kid can skate like the wind. He's not as fast as McDavid, but he is just effortless skating, like the same way Jack Hughes can skate, only he's probably a little bit better on his edges potentially. And his shot is all class already. And again, he is a rookie. He does not play like a rookie. He doesn't look like a rookie. He is just scary out there, right? Immensely talented. Outside of their top line, they don't really have much scoring depth. They have some average, they have some pretty good depth players, right? But it's essentially like a first line, which is maybe actually more like a second line, considering you have a rookie leading it, and then, not enough talent throughout, really. And then a bunch of third and fourth line players throughout their lineup. And they have Seth Jones, but they don't have they don't even have really a number one defenseman. I've been kind of saying that for a while. I never really saw him as a true number one. He's a great number two, complimentary top pairing guy. Very good defenseman. I don't have a problem with him. I just didn't think he was worth his salary. I thought there was neither Darnell Nurse. I was calling that out. I was like, why? What's the matter with you guys? I mean, don't you understand how talented your player is? Why are you overpaying? Trade. And credit to Columbus. They probably won that trade in retrospect, and I'm sure Chicago would want those assets back. Even though Seth Jones is a good player, right? It's not going to hurt them. But they gave up a lot for him. So anyway, so the Flyers do play a strong game against the Blackhawks. They kind of had to settle it down. Again, they give up just a brutal opportunity. Sam Ersson came up huge. And, let's talk about Ersson for a second. I saw people jumping on Ersson. This is exact same shit people did to Hart. I really hope people recognize how over the top and inconsistent people are with goalies. And I can't even stress how wrong of a thought process that is with goaltending. As I've been watching this in 25 plus years, there is nothing sillier than to jump on a goalie's high performance, then to be down on him from one game later, and then to wait for him to rebound for you in the next game. That's not how this works, especially with a rookie. And the way people have responded to Ersson now being the guy All the shit that was being thrown at Carter Hart when he was here is now going right to Airson. I'll be honest with you guys, I'm so tired of it. I just ignore it. I don't really care what anybody says about Airson. If you are judging a goaltender at 24 years old in his rookie year, and again, I've been saying it about Carter Hart, people were judging him at 20. If you are doing that, you don't understand goaltender development. You have not been watching this game long enough, or you have not learned enough from history. That's all I have to say to you. You want to give me judgments, all of that, I don't care. How do you think Cal Peterson got his monster contract? They're out of their goddamn mind to have their goalie give them one good season and give him a, what was it? I think it was a 5-year deal at $5 million. What are you guys out of your mind? Look at what Airson got after a quarter of a good season. He's like barely making $1.5 million for 2 years. That's how you treat goaltenders. They have to earn it. Look at the way people are treating Shesterkin right now. Those who really understand the game, you can hear them. They're like, look, Shesterkin's still the man. But you don't think there are people going like, oh, Shesterkin's not that good. Yeah, just historically amazing season. And I'm sure it had nothing to do with the team in front of him. No, he's a really talented goaltender. This is what it is. You can go to every goaltender in the league. You will not find perfect seasons outside of, essentially one or two guys. Brodeur, and I wouldn't even know Patrick Waz on that. Hasek's not on that list. There is nobody perfect in goaltending. It's not going to happen. So people jumping on Airson for not making look, there were a couple of goals that he probably should have had. Maybe it would have changed the game. Okay, it's one game. He's also been exceptional in other games. And he's 24. He just turned 24. He's a rookie. Like, again, Brian Boucher was a phenomenal rookie goaltender. Did he ever really achieve that performance again? For small periods of time. But you really don't know. Vasili, being a goaltender, brings this up all the time. You must learn from history. Now, I can look at a goaltender and, look at his junior history. I can make guesses, but I definitely don't waver on my opinions on them from game to game. I promise you that much. So if you're doing that, you're doing it wrong, especially with goaltenders. He still has 3 years until he even enters the conversation of being one of the premier goaltenders in the league. So, yeah, I would take a seat back and let's hope he's still here. Again, we still have other goaltenders coming. We don't know exactly what's going to go on with Carter Hart. But I think Airson responding the way he did in the Blackhawks game was phenomenal because he just came out and did what he did. Now, I don't think he necessarily stole the show. He had several exceptional saves. But he didn't have to play that strong because the Flyers blocked primarily majority of the shots that Chicago kind of took. Chicago played really hard. I think they played well for a team that kind of lacks scoring, but the Flyers kind of let them a little bit. They didn't play their best hockey again. Look, it's good that they got the win out, but they got to get the risky pinches. They're worth it if they're timed well, and they've been doing too many of them that are just not timed well. And I'm sitting there cringing, and I'm like, why? Now, if you watch that game, it changed. It started off that way, kind of like remnants of the New Jersey game. And you could tell like the coaching staff kind of settled them down and they started squashing that. And the Flyers played much better defense as the game went on. Now, the game-breaking moment of that game, so first credit to to Hathaway for really having a great goal. Again, Noah Cates and got called out by not just Hathaway himself about how great of a play he made, but Tortorella. And again, I know a lot of people are really low on Cates. There's another example. If you think that I think this guy could play first line center last year, put up 40 points in the NHL as a rookie, and then to see his production this year in his sophomore year, which the sophomore slump does exist, and it exists for 80% of players, maybe higher, with an injury, and you think that I'm low on him and I see him as a fourth line player, you are out of your mind. I don't make decisions like that. I would actually almost bank on the fact that Noah Cates will be a lot more than what he's showing you today. He has late bloomer written all over him as far as being a pivotal player and a guy just like Scott Lawton that teams will die to have on their team. So And that does not make you a fourth line player. I think he's considerably more talented than Garrett Hathaway, and Hathaway is a really good player. I mean, for a bottom six player, we haven't had a player like Hathaway for a while. He's being rewarded offensively right now, but Noah Cates is a step above that. He's got better hands, better shot. He almost never loses a puck battle. I mean, his metrics even show that. He is phenomenal. So he's having somewhat of a struggle season, but it's been picking up. He's been getting assists. He's been scoring a little bit. And I expect that to change. And even Tortorella after the game, after they won, mentioned how he thought that was the strongest line. Now, I think he was frustrated with that game like I was. And while I was, it should have been 4-1. Scott Lawton hits an empty net goal. Or I'm sorry, hits the post on an empty net goal. So it probably should have been 4-1. But again, it was one of those like 4-1 wins, which didn't feel as good as it actually was. They could have played a lot better, right? They can play better than what they showed. But the game breaking moment, let's be honest, we all know it. Flyers are tied 1-1. And Travis Konechny, not too long into the second period, just makes this aggressive end of shift play, season opening, kind of does a little poke, chases the puck himself, comes up the wing, and just shelves it top. And Tortorella in his press conference, related it a little bit to Panarin's ability to play tired. And, Claude Giroux used to be able to do that for us as well. He was more of a passer than a goal scorer, but he would always kind of make that extra pass before he got off the ice, set people up on a break. He was just an amazing quarterback. Like, Konechny is a bulldog, right? A pit bull. Like, you throw him at the net. He has various skills. He's not as good of a playmaker as Giroux. He's not as good of a goal scorer as obviously Austin Matthews, but he's probably, you're right, he's in that 40 goal range, not the 50, 60 goal scores, right? But he is an elite goal scorer. He's got elite passing skills. He's got it all. He's got a top line player written all over him in a balanced view. The same way of Brad Marchand. I still think that's his best comparison. Who again is a 40 goal scorer playing with other elite players, right? He's not going to be doing it on his own, but when you give him the right line mates, he will put up 40 goals. Like, he will be a top line player in the league. Like, look at Verhaeghe, right? Is that guy going to be putting up those type of goals if his team wasn't arguably the best offensive team in the league? Probably not, but he's still going to be a 30 goal scorer, right? And we see Konechny's in that 35 to 40 goal scoring range with a team who can't score for shit on the power play. So the Flyers do a pretty good job. Konechny becomes the game breaker. I don't know if I give him first star. I guess I kind of do, but for me, it was Ersson. Just because I think that save he made in the beginning of the game was the exact opposite of the New Jersey game, where the Flyers kind of gave up that bad break in the beginning of the game. They could have gone down easily 1-0. The tone of the game would have changed. In this case, he made a phenomenal save, a highlight reel save, probably one of the best of his career so far, even though he's done it a few times already. And I think that just kind of allowed the Flyer. It was two big momentum shifts, right? It was that save in the beginning, and then the Travis Konechny goal. And then the icing on the cake was the Garrett Hathaway goal, which was set up by Noah Cates. So there were some pivotal moments in there, but the Flyers didn't give up too many opportunities, but they gave up some golden ones. And I hated the way they played. Not despised it like other games, but I was frustrated with it. It was not an ideal way for me to watch them play. Now, they will play them again on March 30th, and we'll see how that goes. I'm sure Bedard will be red hot at that point, but the Flyers should be on their A game heading into the playoffs. So looking forward to see how they do against Bedard in the future. They did a good job of not allowing the elite player to score this time, which I would say is a positive, especially because it came in red hot. Now, I did mention the captaincy a little bit. The Flyers named captains. Couturier gets the C. Lawton keeps his A. TK gets his other A. I was thinking a lot about this, and I think there's two ways of thinking about this, right? It's Lawton keeping the A means he solidified his spot with the team and won't be traded. I would caveat that with they just named the captain. Before that, everybody thought Scott Lawton was the leader of the room. And if you remember last year, where people have this recency bias where Coots is out, so everybody goes, give Lawton the captaincy. The real leader of the locker room is Sean Couturier. So I'm just saying, in a public statement, you could say, hey, we still got two good leaders in TK and, Couturier, and we obviously have Atkinson. You can play it off there. I don't know if it's actually related, but I just think it's one of those things where it's like it's great to see Lawton keep his A, but I don't think it necessarily identifies whether he's here or not for the future. Again, I do bank on him probably staying. But if you are truly in a rebuild and you're being offered what you believe he's worth, which is probably a late first round pick, again, they're not worth as much as people say they are. Again, Lawton is a late first round pick. If you look at majority of late first round picks, they end up being, like middle six to bottom six forwards. Like most of them are not going to be top line players. So like that's really your top 15, top 10, really, ideally. So it's not worth that much. It's kind of like I'm trading you a fully developed late first round pick player for a potential to get a new one, right? I don't think the Flyers are going to jump towards that necessarily. I don't know. I'm kind of like split on it. I'm okay with it happening if they get the asset. If they trade him for a second, I think it's a mistake. Second round picks don't have a high likelihood of playing in the NHL. So I'd rather have him for a playoff run than to bank on maybe we'll get a player unless they have other plans. Like we don't know exactly what the Flyers are going to be doing. So let me, before I get into full trade deadline talk, let me just remind everybody, please like and subscribe. If you can share our stuff out, it's a humongous help. Follow us on iTunes and Spotify. Give us a rating there as well. And don't forget to hit the notification bell on YouTube to be notified when the episodes come out. Okay, so, remember last year we were talking about Travis Sanheim being traded. I know people are obsessed with draft picks. I am not, unless they are very top of the draft. I'm super fired up about that. Now I see them for what they are, and when I see a second round pick, I go, "Ooh, opportunity to draft a goalie, opportunity to develop a defenseman." That's not coming next year, right? It's not coming maybe even 2 years from now. So like all these people are getting a little too excited about the rebuild thing. I've been saying it since the day Briere took over, and actually prior to that. This whole we're rebuilding, we're doing this. This is a marketing statement. It's bullshit. I'll be honest, it's complete bullshit. You can only make the best decisions and know the best decisions as you move forward. I'll give you an example. In software development, there used to be something, and it's in business too. Typically, older businesses do this. They will do something called waterfall, right? It's where you plan out everything you want to do way in advance. And then you're like, well, we're going to do this on this date and this on this date. And that concept has died mercilessly. Do you know why? Because their plans never came out the way they thought they would. So the industry has adapted something which is essentially created by all the most profitable companies in the world because they kicked everyone else's ass applying this form of logic, is called agile. And the concept there is an iterative thought process. So you do everything in 2-week increments, typically. That can vary. It could be 1 week, it could be 3 weeks, it could be 4 weeks. Typically, the standard is 2 weeks. Because every 2 weeks, you kind of reevaluate. And you have something called a backlog. This backlog has all the things that you want to do. And that shifts. Why? Because the reality of the situation shifts all the time. And that's how you have to realize that the Flyers are going about this. There is no, we're doing this, 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 and this, and it was not set up months ago. That's bullshit. If they were going to do that, they would be morons. You think that they didn't struggle with the idea of even trading Gauthier? They probably had some deals on the table that they thought to take at one point and then went, maybe we can turn this around, right? Everything is about assessing where you are in this current moment with what your end goal is, right? So let's say they had a goal in the very beginning of the season. We're trading Sean Walker, right? Okay. Well, what if the realities have changed? What if, I don't think this is the case, but let's say Ristolainen's career is over and he retires. And then what do? Do you assume that he's gone? Right? What if you know a team wants Ristolainen but can't afford to take him now? Maybe they want him in the offseason. wouldn't you be wise to start negotiations with Sean Walker? Now, I said it on here before all the other media outlets said it. And again, I just play GM. I don't care about rumors. I say what I would do. The rumors are more like a nice validation, right? But I just say what I want to do, right? And I looked at Sean Walker. I'm like, he's a good fit. I got other players that aren't as good of a fit that I would potentially want to move. I would investigate this. Now, the numbers we're hearing coming out of the Sean Walker camp, whether they're true or not, $4 to $5 million from the Flyers, and he sees himself as a $5.5 million player. Sorry, Walker, you are not. Maybe you are for a different team, but for this team, you will not be getting that money. So I think there are two options here. I think even $4 million is a lot of money for Sean Walker because his role will be diminished by the time we don't need him, kind of, And again, that could take a couple years. It doesn't mean it's going to be next year. And we know we really like him. We like him. We like Nick Seeler, but you also want to re-sign Nick Seeler. And at this point, it is not that crazy to say that Nick Seeler might be more valuable than Sean Walker because he's going to be considerably cheaper and he does his role, which is we need a defensive defenseman. We have Cam York. We have Jamie Drysdale. We have Travis Sanheim, right? We have Emil Andre. We have Ronnie Attard. We only really have Adam Yinning and Bonk, who's like not even, he's having an exceptional year, but he's not going to be ready like that. That's not happening. That's not real. People who think that that's real, it's like we get overzealous all the time. Travis Sanheim was a monster in juniors. It still took him time to get ready. Now, maybe Bonk will be ahead of schedule, but we rushed Provorov into the NHL. Jamie Drysdale was rushed in the NHL. It doesn't pay off. So I wouldn't expect, even if Bonk shows you flashes that he is NHL ready, for him to be playing in the NHL immediately. He's a defenseman. The only thing you can really do that with are wingers because the consequences are lower. And typically they're like goal scorers. And they don't have to play center, but it's not really wise. So I wouldn't start penciling in guys who are just drafted, unless they're like, again, top 5 picks into the lineup, right? Most of these guys are going to need development time, but the Flyers do have some names out there, right? Seeler is a great guy to hold on to. Mark Stahl will not be here next year. He's a guy I would be open to moving. Again, I think they would do him the benefit of the doubt of kind of asking for his permission there, just because I think they respect the guy. They brought him in here, on a budget deal where he's not playing, even though he's playing more now, where he's not playing too much. I guess if you trade him to a true contender, maybe he'd be open to that, right? Like if he's going to Colorado, if he's going to Florida again, right? Like maybe he'd be open to that. Maybe like, you know what? I'll go give it a crack. They have a better chance to win a cup. I would accept that. It's only for a month of my life, right? It's not. Yeah, and then I'm done. I want one more chance to win a cup, right? So I think Stahl is possible. I think Walker is still the most likely to get moved because right now Risto is injured. But again, if you are in a playoff spot, you already lost Risto for an unknown amount of time, right? You suspect a month. Who really knows? What if he's out permanently and then these are your defensemen? Then you got to throw Ronnie Attard into the playoffs. You got to throw Emil Andre into the playoffs. It's a whole different game. You're going to be wishing you had Walker and Ristolainen. Like veterans dominate the playoffs. I say it so many times. It's funny. I was actually I was watching the hockey game at my buddy's house. I typically go to his place, and I was there with his dad. And his dad was telling me some amazing story. He grew up playing hockey. Played interesting story. He actually played some outdoor hockey with Mike Richter back in the day. He was just telling me just awesome stuff. He's been watching the Flyers for years. And he was telling me, he's like, hockey's a young man's sport. And I'm like, it's not. He's like, but basketball is more for veterans, just like football and baseball. And I'm like, they're all the same. And my buddy looks it up and looked up the average age for an NHL player. It's 27 and a half. And his dad was like, oh, I'm surprised. I thought it was like 23. I'm like, it's not, because it's not a young man's game. It's a veteran man game. And if you look at a playoff team, show me a team of young people that won a cup when the consequences are the highest, when the physicality is the highest. Imagine the NHL was only 20 games. You're telling me it'd be a young man's game? Bullshit. It would be all veterans. and all hitting like you want to take the other guy's head off. We should be happy that we get to actually watch games where not everybody's getting injured every game, because that's the ramp up that you would see, you know? And that's what the playoffs are. It's a season condensed, and it kind of becomes football, which is why hockey playoffs are so amazing, because every game matters and it's a very physical sport, and football is a great sport too, and every game matters. That's why it's the biggest sport in the United States. So, what do the Flyers do? Do they move guys? Look, I think it's all about value. If you're going to give me a third round pick for Sean Walker, I'm hanging up the phone. If you're going to give me a second round pick, I want a second round pick and a player equal to Helge Grans, potentially better. I don't understand our large incentive to move out Walker unless we are getting exactly what we want. We are better off investing in the X factor of the playoffs and bringing excitement than a third round pick, which could be helpful. But if you look at history with how many players we've been excited about, like look at Noah Cates, fifth round pick, phenomenal draft pick, absolutely phenomenal pick. Like you can't get better value than that at the fifth round. It's not common, at least. It's happened. It's not common. It's like less than a 1% chance, right? But if you want to nail a fifth round pick, you take a Noah Cates. What is Noah Cates? Right? A middle six NHL player, in my opinion. An ideal third line player, a guy who could be mixed into the top nine. Again, I still want him playing with Sean Couturier. I think the coaches are missing that one. And I would almost bet money that if they put Noah Cates with Coots and Tippett, that will automatically be the Flyers' most aggressive and formidable line. And I don't know what they're waiting on, because Cam Atkinson shouldn't be playing in the top line at this point because he's just not producing. I know why they're trying it. You know, you allow struggling players, Coots, because Coots isn't producing right now either. I mean, he's also slowed down. So there is logic to that, right? You put them together, you hope they figure it out. But I really believe that if you put Noah Cates together with Sean Couturier, you know, you create a defensive unit that would just be so immensely annoying to play against that you can play them against the best players in the world. Like you can play them against McDavid, because not only do you have to get past Coots, you now have to get past Cates. Oh, and if you guys make a mistake, Owen Tippett's flying the other way. That's how I see that line playing out. And then you add some goal scoring Atkinson on the third line, put Atkinson, Paling, and then essentially Forrester together on that third line. Drop Hathaway. You have Hathaway, Delorier, and Lawton. I think that's how the Flyers should go into the playoffs. But we'll see. It's not my call. So where are the Flyers with trades? I can't see a single forward being moved. The only player that the Flyers would want to move off of this forward crop right now would be Cam Atkinson, just because they'd be happy to get rid of that salary and use whatever assets they got to potentially go out and get a younger version of Cam Atkinson. But they're not going to eat 50% of his contract for 2 years. Next year is ideally the year they're probably going to try to move Cam Atkinson out of town. Probably not this year, right? If he rebounds, they might not, right? Because again, he was injured for an entire year. If you look at Simmons, Ghost, Giroux, every one of the players, Kevin Hayes, every one of these players that has missed an entire season from some serious injury, it took him an entire season to get back to where they were. Now, imagine where Sean Couturier is, missing 2. So, like, you really need to give it time. And they're at their end of the career, too, so they might never hit, back to where they were, but there should be an improvement going into next season. So, and I include Cam Atkinson in that. Again, he was a very talented, aggressive player. You don't see that same level this year, right? And it could be because of age. It's probably because of injury. He's got a couple more years left in him. He's not that old. So we'll see where he's at next year. That's a guy that the Flyers will probably look to move on. Maybe they can move on from in the offseason, but they'll have to eat his contract, most likely, to get some kind of actual return. Or they have to take a player of similar ilk, and I don't really think they're that interested in doing it. I never even liked the trade of Cam Atkinson for Jake Voracek. I wasn't happy with it. Didn't make any sense to me. I thought it was a stupid trade. Jake Voracek was the better player. You saved some money up front. But you added an extra year contract, which we didn't. Again, this all goes to the fact that it's obvious that Fletcher just didn't have a plan. He's not an idiot. Not every play he made was bad. That's just not true. I mean, the Owen Tippett return plus the first round pick for Giroux was a great. It was a really good return, right? Like he did some things right. He's not a completely inadequate man, right? He will get a job in the NHL again, but he had no real plan, and maybe that was too many heads in the. I doubt he had the same leadership he had now. I mean, I'm sure he'd much rather have the leadership that, you know, Briere has the benefit of, but I think Briere has a plan. Now let's go back to the opportunity here. They have an opportunity to move several players. Again, they're icing 11 forwards a night. Does that like scream we're gonna move a forward? Not necessarily. They're icing 7 defensemen, one of the 8 that they have is currently injured. I think maybe they will move a defenseman. And the most likely is the one with the highest value and expiring contract, which is Sean Walker. I definitely think it's absolutely possible, but the return has to be the right return. If you see him not moved and not re-signed, it means the return for him was a low ball. I don't think that's going to be the case, though. So, and with Risto's injury, I think the likelihood of him being moved, I think he was possible to be moved, but with an injury now, I think it's less likely to get the actual return you want for him. You probably are better off waiting for the offseason, one less year on his contract. Teams will be shifting around. They'll be looking for a defenseman. If you really want to move Ristolainen, you'll have the opportunity. And that's where I think the Flyers might hold on to Walker, because if they've had conversations with teams out there and can gauge the interest in Risto, and maybe they don't get that much for him, maybe they get a second round pick for Ristolainen, right? Which again, we gave up a lot more for him than that, right? We gave up we gave a number 14 pick. That again, this all goes to the Chuck Fletcher insanity, and a second round. So, and a seventh, I think. Yeah, bad trade. So again, they might look at it as like, okay, we can get Risto's money off the books. He's making 5 plus. We want to bring Walker in at 4 million. He might want 5, but we might be like, look, you're happy here. We don't have 5 for you. We have 4, but we'll give you 3 years, right? $12 million contract, something like that. 13 million, right? 4.25, 4.5, right? 13.5 million. Maybe that's what their max is. Again, that's a little high for me for Sean Walker. I think he's a good player, but I think he's benefiting a lot from the fact he's playing with young defensemen. And as Drysdale and York evolve, his ice time is going to diminish. Same thing like Risto, right? So you have to be prepared for that. So, but you also don't want to screw up your playoff chances, because you're still a really feisty team. And if you can make it to the second round and go from finishing 7th worst record in the league to making the second round of the playoffs with a guy like Michkov in your system, perception of your team has changed. Attracting the right free agents changes. And you might be able to find a guy who's 26, 27, who has 6, 8 years left in his career and is a pretty damn good player and might want to come here, right? That could be a defenseman, right? To help, just like what Sanheim is doing for this team, to help bring in the next wave. So I think the whole trade deadline is very interesting. I think if the Flyers are going to be taking on a player and not an asset, it's going to be, a 23, 24, 25-year-old player, maybe younger if they can get it. I think those type of opportunities are there. Maybe that's the Sean Walker trade, right? Maybe they're like, well, we still need a defenseman because we lost the defense. Excuse me, because we lost the defenseman potentially for the playoffs. I don't think, again, I weigh all this stuff in my head. I think it would be better for them to at least be able to get what they wanted, which is a first round pick for a player on this team. And they have 2 guys who probably won't be here when this team is at their upper echelon. They'll be here for their way up, but they won't be here theoretically. But you don't know that. Again, you have to go back to what I was saying. Every year is a new reevaluation. The Flyers play exceptional this year, the way they played, and then shit the bed next year. What do you do with your initial plans, right? So you have to prepare for that with this trade too. That's why they have to keep drafting, right? And if anything, if they go in this season with 3 first-round picks, maybe you can get up into that top 10 and bring, because again, we're not lacking in the bottom 6, middle 6 players. Like we have that in spades. We have goaltending. We're lacking the upper echelon. We need a Tim Stützle. We need I mean, obviously everybody wants Bedard. We have the Kucherov and Michkov, but we need that center, right? We need another top defender in our system. Like that's what we need. And if we can do it, it might be available in the draft too, later in the draft. This is not a draft where, everything is that predictable. Yeah, they almost never are. And you can find elite players all throughout the first round, typically, sometimes in the second. But the Flyers will have to gauge what they want to do with the rest of the season because you are still carrying a bunch of players that will be here for the foreseeable future. You still have to invest in Farabee and Tippett and Frost and York and Drysdale and Ayrson, right? Again, it's a pretty tight team. It's a good core. I think they're going to do a good job of getting what they need to get. I think the Flyers will make a deal in the end. I don't know exactly who it's going to be, but I think it will be for the right value. And I think there is probably some truth to leaking out the value of Walker to allow people to know, oh no, we're going to resign him if you guys don't give us the right offer. Then he's not going to be available for you at all. But if you trade for him, you can resign him, and we won't be able to get him. Otherwise, if he doesn't sign with you, we'll resign him because we like him so much, right? It's like it's all kind of a game. It's all about leverage. So I do think there is some of that there. But I think they're legitimately exploring it as they should have been, as I stated weeks ago, right? He's fit in better than Risto. So like, how do you just ignore that? This whole rebuild talk and notice how like, oh, but they told us they were in a rebuild, but they're doing this. Notice how these guys have no idea what's going on and that their opinions change from week to week. And I have said the exact same shit almost every week. And how I'll say a player is available before Elliott said because I understand how their actual thought process is going as they roll through these things. You just have to think about asset management. You really have to think about asset management. I don't get everything right. I don't even care if I do. I can only say what I would do as a GM, right? I don't go into predictions, but I understand how you would make decisions in certain scenarios, and you're not going to rush into decisions, and you're not going to trade players unless you get blown away. Even the Gauthier thing, right? I said this, and Bill Meltzer agreed with me, and I would almost guarantee it that Drysdale was not available until that trigger was pulled. I think the Flyers didn't get what they wanted until they got what they wanted, and then they made the trade. Again, timing. They weren't going to be, if Drysdale was available when at the draft, right? The Flyers, that was that rumor that the Flyers were trying to move Gauthier for the 5th pick so they could take Reinbacher. I don't even know if they would have taken Reinbacher, but it was probably to take a defenseman. It would probably would have been Michkov and then whatever defenseman was available. I think that's probably more realistic because there were rumors about them trying to move up to get Michkov before anybody else could. And again, Michkov is the generational talent. He's the second best player from that draft. I don't care what other media. It's obvious. It's obvious what the kid is doing. Carlson and Fantilli, they're also exceptional. We'll see. But like, there's a category of 4 players that are really next level. And Michkov, quite frankly, if he was playing against Bedard, it would be it was the Bedard versus Michkov competition. And then the whole world events happen. All of a sudden, Michkov is not as talented anymore. What do you think is probably true? That it's political? Yeah, it's clearly political. All right, so I'm going to keep this one a little bit shorter than what Vasili and I typically do, but I'm going to go into some Phantoms stuff, and then I'll go with prospects, and we can end it on that. So the Phantoms did win a comeback. They had a comeback victory the other day. It's hard for me to pay attention to them because they freaking losing. Cooper Marudi did have the tying goal and the go-ahead goal for a 3-2 win. Just on -20 on the year for a guy who leads the team in points. What does that tell you? And the good old Bobby Brink did have the team's first goal. Again, I didn't get to watch the game. He's got 7 points in 9 games. He's a -4. I am just concerned with a team with this level of talent. Again, they are young in some categories, but they also have a plethora of good veterans and guys who have played in the AHL for years. I just really don't know how much longer Lappy's going to be coach of this team. I could be 100% wrong. Again, I'm not in the prediction game. I'm just telling you, if I'm GM and I look at what the Phantoms have done over the past several years, and the 3 years under Lappy, players have had or coaches have had shorter leashes. That's all I'm saying. And right now, they're not looking like they're gonna hit the playoffs, which is a humongous bummer and not good for development. And, like, they sent down Alexis Gendron, right? He had 5 goals and 2 assists, 7 points in 17 games. Um, that actually is not that bad comparison to Rhett Gardner, who's, he's had actually a pretty good AHL season. That's not really his role to put up goals, but he's got 6 goals, 4 assists in 10 games. In 30, I'm sorry, 10 points in 36 games. So it just shows you Alexis Gendron was already outproducing AHL regulars. I'm not saying it was the wrong thing to send him back. I'm just saying, you know, are you getting the most out of these guys? Wade Allison, who's a guy who already dominated the AHL, has 17 points in 41 games for the Phantoms. He's done better than that. Tanner Lazinski slowed down. Ali Lixell is having he's with the Flyers. He's still having a good season. It's really just Samu Tuamala. And like everybody else is kind of having down years. Ronnie Adder's doing what he does. Emil Andre is not. Again, he's pretty much pro ready. He's just undersized, so it's going to take him a little bit longer. But it's like the players he doesn't need to coach seem to be doing well on their own, and the players that he needs to squeeze more out of, I don't feel that is happening. And that doesn't make him a bad coach, but it doesn't make him a great coach either. And I'd rather have a great coach than an average coach. Maybe, again, he's a younger coach, not as experienced. He could absolutely improve. Not all coaches figure it out in the very beginning. I just don't know. I don't know. I see the success, and my gut would tell me that there's a good chance Lappy's not going to be coach of the Phantoms next year. And I think it's the right move. And I think they need to bring in a more experienced coach, probably one with NHL experience that's willing to take on this job, even for just a couple years, and clean up the way this team plays. They have too much talent to not be a. I've been watching this team. I've been following the Phantoms for a very long time. This is one of the most talented Phantom teams we've had in recent memory, and they're not good. That's not a good sign, you know. So yeah, the Phantoms are doing all right. They are winning games here and there. They're not a shit show, but just they need to be better, you know. And I heard the goaltending blamed, as the problem on Sandstrom. I called it on here. I told you guys I don't buy it. Funny how Cal Peterson was able to win for us at a tougher level, right? And again, that's not like it's one game, but like, did he look like completely horrendous in that game? That's why I still don't buy that Sandstrom shouldn't have been the one called up. I don't buy it. It's how your team plays in front of you, and I don't know because I don't watch the Phantoms enough. But my gut tells me that things aren't going that well. Victor Mete it was on a better point. I'm sorry, not Mete. What's his name? Oh my God, Louis Belpedio was having a better season in the NHL than he is in the AHL. I just think about that. Like, really? Zayd Wisdom has 1 goal in 30 games. How? This guy was a prized 3rd-round pick, almost like a guarantee NHL player. I don't know. I can't blame it all on Lappy. I'm just asking questions. I have a very hard time believing that Lappy is incompetent. But I look at these results and they're just not good. They're just not good. And too many mediocre ECHL and AHL players who will not be playing for the Flyers are getting ice time, and not enough of the players that we need developed. And I think I don't know. I've seen it before and it wasn't good. It wasn't good coaching because, again, it's all about development. And, there are some players who are progressing and doing it. Again, he can't play for them, but I'm just concerned. I see Wade Allison with 17 points in 41 games. It's like he's a +7, one of the only players who are in the plus. But like, come on. Like, Tanner Lazinski has cooled off. He's had some injury problems, but still. I don't know. It's just concerning to me. Again, outside of Sammy Tuamala and Emil Andre, and I guess Ronnie Adder, there's not really a lot of excitement coming. And Elliot Denoyer, was supposed to be, he's got to be able to get in these players' heads the way Tortorella does it, right? We need somebody who can work with young players. Maybe it's finding a juniors coach out there, but I'm not seeing it right now. I'm just not seeing it. I don't buy that it's the level of talent, and I don't buy that it's the goaltending. Maybe I'm wrong. I haven't been watching the team enough, but I just don't buy it from my experience. And all right, let's get into the last topic, and that is prospects. So I did have one little update here on Michkov, which I had to take a screenshot of. Let me go to this. So this is Hockey News Hub. Can confirm now that the Flyers, Matvei Michkov, will indeed play in the Media Hockey League following this season with Sochi. Similar to the Media Football League, hockey players, media personalities, musician, artists play together with a tournament-like structure. Sounds silly. Got to get this kid over here. Like, come on. First game is February 25th. Again, thank you to Hockey News Hub on Twitter he's amazing for Michkov updates. But so we're playing in that. And I just want to put this question out there. Is Michkov, let's say he is Kucherov, right? Let's say he comes in and he is lights out, right? He's Kirill Kaprizov for Minnesota, right? He comes in, automatically your best point producer. Is that enough from where we are today? Everybody keeps saying we're missing elite talent. We're missing elite talent. In some hand, I feel like to get us out of that conversation of are we talented enough, I feel like that conversation dies down. But if I really want to build a team that can win for several years, like always compete, which is really what you need to do, he needs a Lindros, right? I don't know if it has to be Lindros level, but he needs a Giroux. He needs a center. And we thought we had that with Gauthier. And while I still believe in Sean Couturier and I really like Morgan Frost, Frost does not necessarily project to be a number one center at this point. He projects to be more of that middle six, second line. It's still a chance. There's a chance he becomes a number one center. He's had some great flashes. But he's more of like a second line center caliber, young guy at this point. That's like what his ceiling might be, right? Could be wrong. He's still relatively young, but like we need a dominant center to play with this guy. We have the York and the Drysdale young defenseman. I like that. We have Bonk. We're gonna need another one, ideally, even with Emil Andre and other, and Sanheim still in the mix, who's only 27. Right, like we still have a good core here. I really believe in the core. Joel Farabee, I truly believe he will be a star player in the NHL. He's just going to be a late bloomer type of guy. Like it's going to take him a little bit longer. He doesn't just do go crazy moves to score points. You're seeing it now. He's going to take a little bit of time, but he's going to be that 80-point star player, right? All-star caliber player. And Owen Tippett still has a chance to be a star player. I think he's on his way. I think him and Farabee have a similar ceiling. Kind of like all-star caliber, scorer, point producer, whatever, different style players, but I think they're like on that Simone Gagne level projection. But they don't have, even Mike Richards in his prime in this area. There's no Anze Kopitar. There's no Barkov. There's no Nate McKinnon's. This team needs a center more than they need a defenseman. Defense, in my opinion, can be won by a combination of really good defensemen. But if you need somebody who just drives up the middle, drives a line offensively, complements an elite goal scorer to turn him into a potentially 60 goal scorer, 70, we'll see how the game evolves. Right? If we really want Michkov to be a 60 goal scorer in the NHL, he's going to need a center. Like Ovechkin had Backstrom. Voracek had Giroux. Like even Jeff Carter in his best season, he had Mike Richards. Right? Like we need that guy here from Mitchkov. And it's just something I've been thinking about. And right now the Flyers don't necessarily have that guy. Again, Denver Barkey, I really like him. He's having a great year, 79 points, 51 games. He doesn't be projected to be that guy. I mean, realistically, there's a good chance he's gonna be a winger, or I think right now he projects to be like a second line player in the NHL, but like a really good one. We'll see. Maybe he can turn into point, and if he ends up being the guy, I mean, it's shot. It'd be awesome. But he's a little small. There's nobody else in this lineup that projects to be a number one center. I think that will be the Flyers' top goal. Is to find a top line center, and if they have 3 first-round picks, look, I've said it over and over again about Briere. He is sneaky aggressive. I would love to see a package all 3 picks and say, "Fuck it, we need that." I'm going for that. I'm putting all my cards on that guy because he's going to be exactly what we need when Mitchkov gets here. And they know Mitchkov is at least another year away, right? He's not coming next year, realistically. I love it. But maybe that final year, I think, is when he could come over here. So if you manage to get into the top of this draft, right, and you take an elite center, or even just another elite player, you need a 1-2 punch. You have TK. You have TK, you have Mitchkov, you have Farabee, you have Tippett, you have Forrester, you have Brink, but your middle, even with Cates and Paling and Lawton and Couturier, Frost is the only one that's like a play driving, you know, dynamic center. Like Couturier is a two-way elite center who's missed 2 years of hockey, right? You need that Claude Giroux like, that Backstrom like, the Joe Thorntons, Patrice Bergeron, which was, kind of Couturier with a little bit better passing, right? And goal scoring, right? He's like the standard. It was like a Datsuk, right? We need something like that. It doesn't have to be as good as Patrice Bergeron. It can be as good as Sean Couturier, but it's got to be in the offense. It's got to be that Tim Stützle. That's why I named him earlier, right? We need that, even a Tage Thompson, but we need a guy who's offensively gifted who can come up with Mitchkov together. This is what we were hoping we had with Gauthier. We now have Drysdale, which is great, right? We were going to be searching for a defenseman. Now we're searching for a center. I think that's going to be the big thing. Center, probably drafting another goalie. There's a good chance, especially because of the hard unknown situation. Even with the pool we have, they're probably going again. Even with Zavragin and Bjarnason and Kolosov, they're probably going for another goalie. I think there's a good chance of that, and they're probably going for a center. And if they manage to get the guy they want, or they think they can get the guy they want, again, I'm not an expert on this draft. They might draft a center and a defenseman. They could use everything. Everybody, it's not that they're exploding with talent everywhere. It's really just on the wing. But they need a number one center. That's what this team needs. They have Sean Couturier, who is a number one center. Again, he's missed 2 years, and he's on his way to recovery, and he's almost 30 years old. If he's not 30 already, I forget. So they need a number one center. They need a young number one center, clear cut projects as a number one center. They need that. They need that on this team. And I think that Danny Briere is working to get it. So that's that. If you want to talk about why you trade Sean Walker, why you trade Scott Lawton, it's to gain assets to get to that. Because until that is solved, you might not build a dynasty. You can still build a good playoff team, but we're trying to build a dynasty, right? The Chicago Blackhawks, the LA Kings, the Pittsburgh Penguins, right? The Detroit Red Wings. Like, look at the consistency with all of these teams. They had an elite number one center, an elite number one defenseman, and usually a pretty good goaltender. Doesn't have to be the best in the league, but they have a true number one guy at each one of those positions, and the core is built around that. Now, core is different, but typically you need those things if you want to compete every single year, because you can find guys to play on the second line, on the third line, on the fourth, on the second unit, right? A complementary pairing. It's very hard to find a Chris Pronger again. One in his prime, even harder. Dougie Hamilton is not a Chris Pronger. He's a complimentary top pairing defenseman. He is not a true number one. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been moved so many times. Roman Yossi is a true number one. Cale Makar. Erik Karlsson in his prime, even though his defense is a little lackluster. Drew Doughty. These are number one defensemen. And they typically don't even last that long. Right? It shifts. So what you need to do is make sure the timing is right. All right. I'm going to call it at that. This was a good episode. I'm going to keep it just to an hour today just because I'm doing it by myself and it's a lot of me just rambling on here. Want to remind everybody, please like, subscribe, share it out, our stuff. Follow us on iTunes, on Spotify. Hit the bell for notifications. Hit, give us a rating on iTunes and Spotify. All that is tremendously helpful. Again, shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South and Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560 for all of your adjustment needs. Again, you guys have been amazing. Our numbers kind of fluctuate up and down, but, I do find that it kind of is happening with what's going on in the league or, how much content is out there, or titles. But, I definitely notice the people who are checking out all the time. You guys are amazing. It feels so goddamn good to have a voice in the Flyers sphere. I've been watching this team since I was a child, right? And I started off like a soccer fan as like a kid. I was Israeli, up until recently, there weren't even really Jewish hockey players in the NHL. That's finally changing, but there's going to be an Israeli kid being drafted in the first round. That's like, doesn't happen. So I was a soccer kid. Then I discovered hockey and everything changed overnight. It was like literally overnight. That was it. Hockey was life. And I slowly stopped playing soccer while playing both sports. And I was just like, hockey is so much more important to me and still is till today. And the Flyers have meant so much to me. So you guys listening and, supporting me rambling into a microphone. And this is my favorite part about covering this team is just talking into a microphone. And having Vasili was amazing. I told him, I scouted him. I followed him first. I was looking at what he said, and I was like, this is my guy. And he's been awesome. I love Vasili. He's been a very welcome addition to not just this podcast, but Flyers Nitty Gritty. Like Jamie and I always tell him, he's like, you're our top dog. Like we want to give him leadership. We want to give him everything just because he's so sharp and he's a good dude. He's younger than both of us. And I just love the guy. And I love you guys, truly. The support and listening and caring about what we say and, reminding me that I said something. I used to scream into the void and I'd be like, I told everybody and nobody ever listened to me. Now I don't have to say that anymore. And I can see people commenting and being like, oh, you mentioned that. I have friends that listen to my podcast. So they'll hit me up and be like, yo, you said that. That shit is awesome. It feels great. And I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for everything you've done for us. Again, we don't do this for money. Hopefully we can make some money off of it. We're going to. If we hit 1,000 subscribers, that would be awesome. Make a little bit more money. I've talked to people about how to monetize this more. I just don't do it for money. I'm trying to build another business. I have a full-time job. I just love this team. If I could pick any dream job, it's going to be it's going to be Danny Briere's job. A job that I tell people I will be fired from. I'm walking into it being like, I will lose my job. And I'm willing to throw it all away for one opportunity to do that job. It would be, and I'm not the only one. Do not get me wrong. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who want that job. But it's just cool to even be part of it to some kind of way, right? So thank you all. You guys all help make that happen, and truly appreciate you and love you guys. So remember to keep listening to us, and remember to always stay curious.